Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here is your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
They called it, my friends, the most secure election in American history, in the history of the world, the election of 2020. And now we have some developments on that front. We've got a lot happening there. We've got the FBI coming in and basically executing a search warrant, taking control, seizing the records, I guess, the ballots and so forth in Fulton County, Georgia, from the 2020 election. We've got lawsuits. I want to talk about this today, but I want you to remember, as I know you do, that we were told this was the most secure election in American history, which is a stupid way to say anything. It's just a dumb way to say it. But people, again, the power of repetition, the power of this insidious drip, drip, drip of whatever it is they want to tell us, it is powerful to some people. It's how some people start saying the phrase, my body, my choice, and they think that that means something when an abortion actually is affecting the body of another person. Of course, it's your body, your choice, but that only pertains if it's your body. But people hear it so much, and that's just one example. Drip, drip, drip. There's no filter for a lot of people. There's no analysis. There's no thoughtful consideration. And the next thing you know, they just repeat the phrase, the most secure election in American history, when that's just the stupidest way to... That's not how you describe it. This reminds me of Trump-Russian collusion. I remember in the days after the 2016 election, when it was cool to question the election outcome, when questioning the outcome of the election didn't mean you were someone trying to overthrow the government. Remember that? We had an entire media. We had an entire entertainment industry, entire Democrat Party that were engaged in trying to persuade electors to not vote as per the laws of their states in accordance with how the people of their state voted, and to cast their ballots for somebody else to stop Trump from being president. You remember this. Martin Sheen and other Hollywood actors and actresses took to the camera to tell people to just not vote for Trump. You don't have to vote for Hillary, just don't give Trump enough electoral votes. Remember this? They tried to undermine our election in 2016. No one pays any attention to this. I mean, people like you do, people who are thoughtful and considerate and can recognize and identify and understand the blatant double standards that exist here, the hypocrites that are out there. They understand that was happening in 2016. They understand that was an attempt to stop Trump from winning the election in 2016. And then 2020 rolls along, and any questions about the election whatsoever led you to be targeted. If you asked questions, heck, I remember on this program, I just asked questions about things that didn't compute, questions about things that didn't make sense, questions about things that turned everything we had learned, all the other, what do they call them, bellwethers, all these other indicators in 2020 that indicated Trump was going to win or that things were going well for Trump. And all those things were turned on their head. All these things, the 3 a.m. vote drop, the way that vote tallies were changed on screens of televisions, which folks for the media were getting those numbers from states' actual results. Why were they changing? What was going on? You weren't allowed to ask any questions. You had to just accept it. And then they thought that the nail, I guess in the proverbial coffin, the nail in the coffin of against the argument about, not even the argument, against the people who simply had questions was simply to repeat every chance they got that this was the most secure election in American history. Well, now we're realizing if that's the case, now we're asking ourselves, why is there a federal criminal search warrant that's going on? Why are there alleged missing boxes if this was the most secure election in American history? If this was so secure, why are there any missing boxes? Shouldn't we want this to be the case study? Shouldn't we want every detail captured into the public record so that we could repeat the brilliant work of the election officials in 2020? Why is there a lawsuit that's now out there that's designed to block examination of the records? I figured that you would want people to know just how you pulled off the most secure election in American history. Security should mean that there's documentation. Documentation should be able to be reconciled, meaning that it should match the votes. Reconciliation should be easy. It should be immediate. None of these things appear to be the case. Remember, in 2020, Trump lost Georgia to President Joe bribery by 11,779 votes. That's a razor-thin margin. What really happened there? Do those numbers really hold up to scrutiny, or was there some funny business going on there? Were there some shenanigans? We're going to talk about this today. And fortunately, it's a different world. I don't think we'll get shut down today. Who knows? Who knows in this world? But now that the censorship administration is not in power and there's no collusion between president bribery and foreign countries, allegedly, to enrich his son and his brother and probably himself as well, allegedly, the obstacles to me saying what I want to say have decreased dramatically. And so I'm going to say them. I have all along. I have questions. I don't have answers to a lot of these things, but it certainly, to me, as an objective observer here, does not appear to be something that you would expect from the most secure election in American history. Dare I say the history of the world. I think that they presented this in such a way that 2020 was the model that all elections around the world should follow. These are their words, my friends, not mine. Yes, I might pour a little bit of hyperbole in there just to kind of make a point, but that's how they talked about this. They talked about this election in 2020 being the best. It was the example, the shining example. Well, it should be able to withstand some scrutiny then, don't you think? I certainly think so, as friends. Ever notice how some families seem to have a plan that lasts for generations? That is not by accident, my friends. Full Suite Wealth works with people who want their wealth to make a difference for years to come. Their team brings together high-level investment strategies like private equity, private credit, and option strategies, coupled with expert legal guidance. It's about making sure your vision becomes a reality for the people you love today and tomorrow. If you're looking to do more than just manage your money, if you want to leave a mark, build something lasting, take a look at Full Suite Wealth. Jason and his team are poised and ready to help you build that plan that lasts for generations. Visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy. Secure your future. Okay, let's go back in time here just a little bit, and let's just kind of set the stage as what's been happening here over the past couple of weeks. January 28th of this year, what is that? 2 weeks ago, the FBI executed a federal search warrant at Fulton County election facility in Georgia. This is Atlanta. Approximately 700 boxes of ballots and related election materials were seized by the FBI. The warrant was approved. Hear me say this. This was done legally. This was the Trump administration following the law. A federal magistrate approved the warrant. The affidavit alleges that record retention and documentation had discrepancies. This again in relation to the 2020 election, the most secure election in the history of the world, of civilization as we know it. In fact, I don't know what people, alien life form, if it exists, what they do on other planets, but I'm sure 2020 could teach them a thing or two about how to do their elections more secure wherever they may find themselves. So you've got 700 ballots that have been seized. There's reportedly discrepancies. Fulton County has responded by filing a lawsuit. They want these things returned, and they want to restrict the amount of review that the federal government can do. Now, pause that for just a moment. And I've seen this, in fact, again, as I was going through my notes, reading, planning, thinking. I was putting together kind of some bullet points I wanted to hit, as I normally do. And I realized that something that kept coming up is this argument that this is about federal or local control of elections. That's preposterous. If someone says that to you, you need to LOL, laugh out loud in their face, and nicely say, look, I'm not, this isn't personal, but that's ridiculous. Because, my friends, if, first of all, the election of the President of the United States is a federal election. It is an election where everybody in the country gets to voice on that particular seat, right? That particular office, the Vice President and the President of the United States. What's unique about this is that this is the seat that everybody gets to vote for. Everything else is localized to some degree, right? You have senators that are elected, senators are elected by all the people of a state. That's not the way it used to be. That's water under the bridge, unfortunately. I think we need to return to what the Constitution originally set up in regards to how senators were elected, which is that state legislatures did the electing. But that's been changed via constitutional amendment, and I don't see that being changed anytime soon, if ever. But everybody votes for their state's senator. Everybody that's in the state who's a legal resident, or if Democrats have their way, and illegal. If you're a visitor passing through, if you're an alien from a foreign, another world, if you're present and you show an ID at the polls, or even if you don't, if you just say, I should be voting, they should trust you because nobody lies in elections, and you can cast a ballot if the left had its way. But everybody in the state votes for a senator. Everybody in a congressional district can vote for a congressperson. Then you have everybody in a city that can vote for the mayor or the city council, or however this is, shakes out all the way down to local township level offices and so forth, or small towns and that sort of thing. But president is where everybody gets to vote. It's the head of the executive branch, president and vice president. And that's how this is set up. And to suggest that the federal government has no interest in the integrity of that election in particular is preposterous. The state did run it. The state running it is why we had these problems. Doesn't mean that states shouldn't run it. What it means is that this particular state, this particular county in this particular state has a lot of abnormalities. And so it's absolutely legitimate, 100% legitimate for the federal government to come in and to do this, especially if they have a warrant. So think about this. You've got the executive branch going to the judicial branch, asking for a warrant. They have to give enough information to satisfy the magistrate or the judge's decision or issuing the warrant. For that to happen, the judge has to have certain things, certain expectations met, and those were. And so that part of this is, again, a faux outrage about a violation of federalism. There is no violation of federalism here. No one's trying to take over Fulton County's ability to run their local election. What we are trying to do, or what they are trying to do, is make sure that they're held accountable if they violated the law. And the law is clear. The law is very clear on what is supposed to happen. And there are countless examples of how these things did not happen in Fulton County. And not just Fulton County, but folks, I mean, this has happened in other places as well. I can't get into all of that today. I want to talk about this because this is the one that's relevant in the news, the headlines right now. So there's reports out there that are circulating that there are more than 40 boxes, 44 or more boxes of missing or unaccounted for ballots. Now, in 2020, I mentioned this, I think, off the top earlier in this segment, Trump lost Georgia, or Biden, President bribery, won Georgia by 11,779 votes. The total votes cast in Georgia, the records that were given, is just under 5 million votes. So 5 million votes that were cast approximately, and they are separated, the two candidates, the two primary candidates, Joe Biden, President bribery, and Donald Trump, are separated by 11,779 votes. That's a very, very small margin. So let's just take some guesses here. I went to ChatGPT and I just tried to say, look, give me an idea. Give me an idea of how many ballots we may be talking about if there's 44 missing boxes. And so Chat said, you know what? If they're loosely packed into some of these standard size boxes, there might be about 300 ballots per box. That would come out to 13,200 ballots if there were 44 boxes. So that is more than the margin of defeat. So if, and I'm not saying that there were, listen, been very consistent on this. I'm very fair on this. I have lots of questions. I am very skeptical about what happened in Georgia in particular, but other states as well, Pennsylvania, Michigan. There's questions in lots of places, California in general. There's just questions that I have, things that don't add up, things that don't make sense. If you're trying to be fair, why would you have some of the rules that you have? If you're trying to make sure that only citizens can vote, why would you be doing the things that you're doing? Why would you be issuing driver's licenses to people who weren't citizens? Why would the only requirement to vote be that you check a box and say that this is me and I'm an American citizen? Great, cast your ballot. None of this passes the basic smell test for me. So there's at least around, say, 13,000 ballots, which should cover the margin of error. And again, that's assuming something very scandalous happened here and that there's 13,000 or so made-up ballots that are just fake cast for Biden. I'm not saying definitively that happened. I'm just explaining that could be an explanation of what's in the 44 missing boxes. And ChatGPT also said if they're packed tightly, some of these boxes could have potentially around 1,000 ballots in it. So we could be looking up to 44,000 ballots, which is roughly 4 times the margin of error. So what is exactly inside these missing boxes? Do the boxes exist? Are they full of ballots? Are there partial batches? What's in it? Are they provisional ballots? Are they missing from the overall inventory list? When did they go missing? Who last signed the chain of custody? Are these real ballots or are they imagined figments of our imagination, my friends? Again, this is the most secure election in American history, undoubtedly the history of the world. If that is true, then every ballot should be traceable. It should be logged. It should be every time that they were transferred, the chain of custody, that should all be documented. Every seal, every sign-off should be recorded. Digital ballot images should be preserved. The tabulator tapes should be archived. The inventory should be instantly reconcilable. That's another problem I have with this. And you hear me talk about this on election night. There is no way in the world that it should take as long to count ballots in states as it takes. It just should not happen. It absolutely should not happen. This is not some sophisticated operation. This is an issue of having manpower. We're counting. This is something that you could get a third grade class to do, a kindergarten class. Go in there and count. Count the votes. If you need more, if you're getting a lot of ballots and you need more people, then get more people. This is one of the legitimate things a government is supposed to do, is manage its elections, but they don't. And they tell us constantly, every election, well, it might be a week or so before we get, what do you mean a week or so? What do you live in a fantasy world? What is going on to where that seems remotely like a legitimate explanation or expectation, I should say. What are they thinking? We'll get that back to you in a week? You're counting check marks or, X's on a piece of paper or in a computer system. In fact, it should be readily available quickly. Well, we got to open up the ballots that came in by the mail. Okay, we'll get more people to do that. Is there no more efficient way that you can think of to do this? It's going to take days, even a week. Why do you want to count ballots that are coming in after the deadline? What is going on here? This is preposterous. These sorts of things contradict the ridiculous, most secure election claim in American history. Either documentation failed or there was something nefarious going on. Either there was just basic lapses in following procedure and the law, which is no minor deal, but maybe they just didn't sign off on them. But that's a big maybe. That's a big consequence because we lose confidence in those votes. I remember years ago in 2000, boxes of ballots being discovered in Florida in the trunks of cars, or I think some boxes were found in a classroom at a school. It's just remarkable. That's from 2000. Got to take a break though, my friends. If you have a company, if you're in HR, if you're in marketing, and you're in charge of branded merchandise or getting things with your logo on it, check out Red, White, and Brand. They put your logo on almost anything. redwhiteandbrand.com is where you can go to find out more. This is owned and operated by us here at the Todd Huff Show. redwhiteandbrand.com. Promo code Todd's going to save you 10% on your first purchase there. Red, White, and Brand, your logo on almost anything. redwhiteandbrand.com. Promo code Todd. Time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Talking about what's happening here in Fulton County, Georgia, pertaining to the FBI search, the seizure of election documentation, ballots, and reports that there's missing boxes and all that sort of stuff. We've been talking about that. That's what I want to continue talking about here today, especially here in this segment. I want to talk about allegations that have been raised as reported in the affidavit. So there's an affidavit that supports the warrant, right? There's an affidavit that was used to get the warrant issued. And this is what it reportedly references. Number one, that there are possible violations of federal election record retention law. There's a 22-month preservation requirement for federal elections. We're outside that window today because, of course, we are, 5.5 years, a little over 5 years from Election Day. But there's no evidence that they followed this procedure. Alleged, I should say, discrepancies between physical ballot counts and the recorded inventory. We've got these missing boxes. Why would the most secure election in American history have a discrepancy between the ballots you have and the ballots you counted? That doesn't make sense. There are concerns that there may be missing ballot image files. There are laws and processes that each state has as to what they're supposed to be doing, and this is something they're supposed to be doing. And it doesn't appear like this was done on at least some, perhaps many of the ballots. Why? So now there's not a digital image of certain ballots. Why wasn't that done? What does that mean? Is that just an innocent mistake? Again, you can say that I point that out because it could be incompetency. Some of this could be incompetency or laziness or just government is terrible at running anything. But when I say that, I don't want to be misunderstood as though that's no big deal. There's a reason that these laws and processes are in place, and that is to make sure that the counts that are reported and that are certified by the state actually match what was cast. And if it doesn't, then you need to make your system better. We should be auditing every state. Every state should be auditing itself financially, and it should be auditing its elections just to make sure that it's doing the proper procedures. If there's gaps and holes in the process, okay, we understand that not everybody's perfect. Mistakes are going to happen, but acknowledge them, seek to fix them, and move on. Don't try to hide these findings from us. Don't try to file a lawsuit to keep us from, to keep those from being seized when it's perfectly legitimate, by the way, for this to happen, as I laid out earlier. But this is not how you would expect the most secure election in the history of the world to, some of the information to be about it. And you definitely wouldn't think that they would want to hide just how wonderfully they were doing their jobs. There's documentation gaps in chain of custody records. Now, again, this may sound like no big deal to some people, but once the ballots are cast, even before that, once the ballot is created, it needs to be properly stored. We need to know where that ballot is at all times. There has to be, the chain of custody says those ballots were here. Then we mail them out, or then we put them out there for people to use in in-person polling locations on election day, right? That's where they were. Tom took them over to Susie. Susie signed off on them. Now they're at Susie's station. They went into the machine. They went into Ben's station, right? And we know, okay, they're here now, right? There's video evidence at a lot of these polling places. There they are. The ballots are over there. By the way, reminds me of some video that certainly raised eyebrows and questions back in Fulton County. But again, you're not supposed to ask these questions, no matter what it looks like or what it might be evidence of. You're not allowed to say those things. But that's the evidence we see. And then you show me chain of custody that can't account for where these ballots were. They need to be accounted for, because if we don't know where they were, how do we know they weren't tampered with, right? This is beyond simple to me. And it's simple to any fair-minded person. This is what the affidavit alleges, is that there were gaps in the chain of custody records. If there's gaps in the chain of custody records, again, we don't know where those ballots were at a given time. And if we don't know where they were, how do we know they weren't tampered with? How do we know? Answer the question. I don't think it can be answered. I don't think it can be. We on the honor system suddenly? This is preposterous. There's also, according to the affidavit, potential failure to preserve required election materials. Again, you could say, well, that was an innocent oversight, or some person could say, well, maybe that's evidence of them trying to cover their tracks from making up numbers in some way. I'm not alleging it. I'm just saying when we lose the documentation and we don't follow the prescribed method by which we keep track of or keep these ballots in custody and keep an eye on them, that anything could have happened. Anything could have happened. There's inconsistencies in archival and storage records, again, according to the affidavit. And there's questions about reconciliation between the paper ballots, between the digital ballot images, the tabulator tapes, and the reported totals. None of this stuff adds up, or at least some of these things don't add up. So what does that mean? How does that make sense? You can't constantly say, well, they just made mistakes. Do you think that the government is as understanding to you? If you make a mistake on your tax filing, we're entering tax season here. Do you think they're going, Bill just made a mistake. Good old Bill. No, they think that that's not how that works. If you own a business, if you file something, even if you did your best and you think that this is what they're asking for. You never have an answer, especially if you start off as a solopreneur or a small business person. You'd never have the answers about what some of these forms really mean and how do I get to this number I've got to report. And undoubtedly, you're going to make a mistake. I remember one time I got a sales tax bill for a massive amount of money because they changed my filing. They changed my filing from, and I forget what it was, annual to monthly. They didn't, or no, it was monthly to early, I think is what it was. It's been a while. And we had made a large sale the previous month, and they changed it. They didn't notify me. I got a massive bill in the mail saying I owed a bunch of sales tax. I called the state, and I said, hey, I got this. What's going on? I don't owe this month. I'd owed a similar bill last month because we had a large order, but I didn't, we didn't repeat that order this month. I wished we did, but we didn't. And she said, the only way, I kid you not, I promise you, this what she told me. She was very nice. She's like, well, you wouldn't have known. And I said, okay. And she goes, well, there's one way you would have known. And I said, well, what's that? She said, if you would have picked up the phone and called. And I bit my tongue because I'm like, is that part of should that be on my to-do list for the day? Call the state. Hey, this is Todd, just making sure I don't have any surprise charges that I'm supposed to be paying you today, right? It's ridiculous. And then she said, to her credit, she said, and you wouldn't have known that. You wouldn't have done that. So she's like, I'm going to fix this. You can file with your correct amounts due. I'll take care of it. I think I still had to pay the fine. That's the other thing. You have to pay some late fee for a charge that you didn't even know you had because they moved the date on me, and they can wipe out all the initial charge, but they can't wipe out, they tell you, the late fee. This is the sort of stuff it doesn't seem like a two-way street to me. They want us to be understanding about all these, it's just hard to run an election. It's a lot of emotion, and man, they tried their best. And meanwhile, they're dropping the hammer on people for some innocent mistake or misunderstanding because government doesn't communicate worth a nickel. It's just not, it doesn't add up. It's not consistent. And this is important. If they can't tell us where ballots were, if numbers don't add up, what are we supposed to make of that? And the audacity to tell us that it's the most secure election in American history when it doesn't even balance just think about that for a minute. Does that mean, let's assume that they're telling us the truth, and let's say that is the most secure election. So are we then to assume that all other elections are even more problematic than this? I mean, the balance sheet is off even further? What are they even trying to communicate? I'll tell you what they're trying to do. They're trying to shut us up so that we don't criticize them and hold them accountable for what it certainly looks like may have happened. Friends, if you're curious about Kratom or you're just trying to figure out who to trust, let me introduce you to Christopher's Organic Botanicals, a family-run company. They offer natural, lab-tested Kratom. It's not the synthetic junk, the garbage that's given Kratom a bad name. They provide Kratom that is responsibly sourced, tested for purity. That's what Christopher's believes in, and they work directly with farmers in Indonesia. They follow the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. No gimmicks, no shortcuts. Just clean, honest alternative for people looking for a more natural way to support their health. You can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. It's a great way to start. Again, do your research first. If you think it's for you, this is a good place to begin. Coupon code Todd Huff will save you 10%. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Promo code Todd. Truth, tradition, transparency, and yes, time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Yes, we're talking here about the Fulton County election in Georgia, in Atlanta, in 2020. The most secure election. I want to say this every chance I get to point out just how preposterous what we have been told actually is. These people, they will stop at nothing. They will stop at nothing to create the outcome that they want. Nothing will stop them. Again, it's the Seinfeld-Newman strategy. They will do whatever it takes. Emphasis on whatever, my friends. Whatever it takes. As long as it takes them so long as it takes Trump out of office, as it may have potentially done in 2020, or Republicans out of office. They will do whatever it takes. I'm telling you, whatever. Remember, we had criminal charges. Trump had a mugshot. These are not innocent people, allegedly, who just made some mistakes. There's at least some nefarious actors in them. Maybe some of them did. I don't know. But this is not just an oopsie. My mistake, my bad, clean up on aisle 5. That's not what this is. This is, at some level, if this holds true and what we're being told is accurate, how we've seen this being weaponized, we know that it's at least intentionally being done by some people. Again, maybe there's useful idiots along the way. Maybe there's ineptitude along the way. Maybe there's a mixture of things. But this is, they're willing to do whatever it takes, my friends. That's my thoughts on this. Those are the allegations, and that's what the evidence seems to force us to make sense of, are these, just how bad can you be while you're telling us that it's the best you've ever done? That's a legitimate question. How bad can you be while you go out on the public-facing side and tell us that that's the best you've ever done? Because that's what they've done, and they still maintain it. And if you even hesitate, if you breathe a question into the air, they will go bonkers. If they listen to this show today, they will go bonkers. I've made no outlandish claims. I've asked a ton of questions. I think that there's something nefarious that's happened. I don't know how many were involved. It could be a mixture of ineptitude. It could be a mixture of a lot of things. But there's a lot of holes here that seem to me that at some point the only logical explanation is that people were trying to work the system to get a result that they wanted. That's what it looks like to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but listen, it definitely isn't just this standard example for all the world to follow on how to run an election. So I've got some concluding thoughts on this, my friends, in a moment. But think about this really quickly. Your investments are like seeds that you plant. They grow, they multiply, but they also bear fruit. Is that fruit the type of fruit that you want? At 4-8 Financial, they believe your money should reflect your values. They specialize in wealth management and biblically responsible investing, screening out companies that do not align with your faith. It's all part of their purpose-centered financial planning, helping you live a life of meaning, a life of purpose. If you want to see to what degree your investments, your current investments, align with your values, all you have to do is head on over to 48financial.com/Todd. Again, 48financial.com/Todd, and take a quick and easy assessment. That assessment, the results of that will then be sent to you, and you can see to what degree your investments currently align with your values. 48financial.com/Todd. Friends, 48 Financial is here to worry about your money so you don't have to. All right, so listen, election integrity is a big thing, and it depends upon the whole process, right? The intake logs, the way that these things are categorized and filed, and the way that the chain of custody is kept, if there's sheets that show where these things were transferred, how they were stored, where are the logs, access, who had access to these, ballot image files, making sure that the digital files match the actual count, and the physical copies of ballots, the tabulator tapes, the reconciliation reports. This should add up. This is basic math. This is not trigonometry. We're not launching missiles. We're not shooting a space shuttle to the moon or some such thing. This is basic arithmetic. It doesn't get any simpler than this. This is not complicated. They ought to be able to do this. And at best, this is an administrative disaster with all these things that have happened. At best, this is a shining example of how not to run an election, how not to manage your records and all that sort of stuff. If the affidavit, again, we'll see, time will tell, but based upon what we're being told and what's reported, and the affidavit, that this is not the standard example that we should all aspire to. So this, again, could mean a lot of different things: administrative failure, record retention violation, storage mismanagement, or potential criminal activity. That is absolutely what is possible here. Again, there were 5 million votes cast. The margin of victory was 11,779 votes. And you remember how much they hated Trump. They tried everything in their power to stop him. I've gone through this a lot on this program. And I really think that they wish now, today, that they wish Trump would have won in 2020 so they wouldn't have to be dealing with him today. Anyway, my friends, I've got to run. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. SDG.